I'm 82 years old. That still feels strange to say out loud. 82. I don't feel ancient every day, but I feel finished. Like most of the big doors in my life have already closed, whether I notice them closing or not. I want to say something right away, before I lose my nerve. I wasted about 50 years of my life, not because I was poor, not because I failed, not because life was unfair to me. From the outside, my life probably looked fine, more than fine, actually. I had work, I had freedom, I had choices. I could wake up and decide what kind of day I wanted, and most of the time I got it. That's what makes this hard to explain. I didn't lose those 50 years in one big mistake. I didn't crash and burn. I didn't hit rock bottom. I made a decision that felt calm, logical, even responsible at the time. And then I spent the next 5 decades living inside the consequences of it, without fully realizing what it had taken from me. It happened when I was 31. I remember the age clearly because I'd just started telling people I was in my 30s. Like, that meant I had things figured out. I didn't. I just said it with more confidence than before. She told me she was pregnant on a Tuesday evening. Nothing dramatic. We were standing in her kitchen. The light above the sink was too bright, and I remember thinking it needed a different bulb. That's the kind of thing my mind does when it's scared. It looks for something small to hold on to. She didn't cry. I didn't either. We just stood there for a moment, both of us, waiting for the other one to speak first. Finally, I said something like, "Okay, we need to talk about this." That was my instinct, even back then, to turn everything into a conversation, a problem to be solved, not a feeling, a situation. We talked for days, maybe weeks. I don't remember exactly how long, which probably tells you something. What I do remember is how reasonable we both sounded. We weren't teenagers. We weren't reckless. We made lists, pros and cons, money, timing, what kind of parents we'd be, whether we even wanted to be parents at all. And the truth is, we didn't. Or at least, we didn't want to be parents then. Not with our lives the way they were. Not with everything we thought we were still supposed to do. I told her I was scared I'd resent her, resent the child. I said I didn't want to become someone bitter and trapped. She said she understood. She said she was scared too, scared of losing herself, scared of becoming invisible. In the end, it wasn't a fight. That's important. No shouting, no slammed doors. We agreed, together, calmly. We decided not to go through with the pregnancy. And this is the part people don't like hearing, the part that still makes me uncomfortable to say. After it was done, there was relief. Real relief. We went out to dinner a few nights later. We drank wine. We laughed. We talked about a trip we wanted to take. It felt like we'd escaped something heavy, like we'd just put down a weight we weren't ready to carry. At the time, I thought that feeling meant we'd done the right thing. We didn't talk about it much after that. Not because it was forbidden, it just didn't seem necessary. Life filled the space quickly, the way it always does when you let it. Work deadlines, weekends away, dinners with friends. Ordinary things. Good things, even. If I'm being honest, for a long time I thought we'd handled it well. Better than most people would have. We didn't tear each other apart. We didn't blame. We didn't spiral. We stayed together. That felt like proof. Proof that we were mature, rational, in control. There was this quiet pride I carried around, though I didn't say it out loud. I thought we'd avoided becoming one of those couples who stayed together out of obligation. We were still choosing each other, every day. Or at least that's what I told myself. Whenever the subject of children came up around friends, we had our lines ready. It's just not for us. We like our freedom. Not everyone needs the same life. And people nodded. Some even looked envious. That part mattered to me more than I'd like to admit. Inside the relationship, though, something had shifted. Not suddenly. Nothing you could point to and say, there, that's when it broke. It was more like a background noise you only notice once it stops. We argued, like any couple, about money, about time, about stupid things that weren't really about what we said they were about. And every time, after the heat died down, there was this unspoken question hanging between us. Why are we still doing this? We never asked it directly. We didn't need to. Without a shared future that demanded compromise, without anything bigger than our own comfort, every argument quietly reset the stakes. Staying together was always optional. At the time, I thought that was a strength. I see now it was the beginning of the end. For a while, things were easy. That's the word I would have used back then. Easy. We had space. We had money. We didn't have to plan around anyone else. If one of us wanted to travel, we traveled. If one of us needed time alone, we took it without guilt. No schedules pinned to the fridge. No long-term promises we couldn't quietly walk away from if they stopped making sense. I told myself this was what a healthy relationship looked like. Two adults choosing each other freely, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. That idea mattered a lot to me. I'd seen too many couples stay together out of duty and resentment. I didn't want to become that. And for a while, I truly believed we'd beaten the system. We weren't unhappy. That's important. I don't want to rewrite the past as darker than it was. We laughed, we shared meals, we had routines that felt comforting. We talked about the future in vague, open-ended ways. Maybe someday, we'll see. Those kinds of phrases. But if I'm honest now, looking back, I can see how often we used freedom as a shield. Whenever something got uncomfortable, we reminded ourselves we didn't have to solve it right away, or at all. We could always take a break, reassess, step back. There was no deadline forcing us to grow up faster than we wanted to. I told myself that was wisdom, that pressure ruins love, that people change best when they're not cornered. What I didn't see, what I couldn't see at the time, was that we weren't building toward anything. We were maintaining something pleasant, something lightweight. And lightweight things, they don't hold very well when the wind picks up. I didn't feel the cost of that then. Not really. I felt young, capable, untethered. I thought that feeling would last. We used to say love should be light. That was another one of our phrases. Love shouldn't feel heavy. Love shouldn't feel like a burden. If it does, something's wrong. I said that more than she did, but she nodded along. Or maybe she believed it too. It's hard to tell now. When friends got married or had children, we congratulated them, meant it, and then went home, feeling quietly relieved it wasn't us. We'd talk about how tired they looked, how stressed. See? I'd say. That's exactly what we didn't want. And she'd smile. But sometimes the smile came a second too late. I didn't notice that at the time. What I did notice was how easy it became to postpone decisions. Moving in together permanently, buying a place, making plans that stretched more than a year ahead. There was always time. We weren't running out of anything, as far as I could tell. But when we argued, and we did, more often as the years went on, something strange happened. The fights didn't have gravity. They flared up, burned hot for a day or two, and then just dissipated. Not because we resolved them well, but because neither of us felt anchored enough to push through the discomfort. There was no shared stake big enough to force the hard conversations. No, we have to figure this out. No, we can't afford to let this break us. If one of us pulled away, the other didn't chase very hard. Not out of pride, out of principle. We told ourselves that choosing someone should never require pressure. And slowly, without either of us naming it, that principle turned into distance. The relationship didn't end with a betrayal or a dramatic moment. It ended the way it had lived for years, gently, reasonably, with both of us agreeing it was probably for the best. We hugged. We wished each other well. We walked away. At the time, I thought that was proof we'd done everything right. Now I understand it was proof that there was nothing holding us there. I didn't understand what any of that meant until much later. Not when we broke up. Not even in the years right after. I stayed busy. That was always my solution. Work, travel, people drifting in and out of my life. Nothing stuck long enough to hurt too much. It wasn't until my late 70s that the noise finally died down. I was in a hospital room. Nothing dramatic, just tests, monitoring. One of those stays where no one seems worried, but they still won't let you go home. The room was clean, almost too clean. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. I remember staring at the phone on the little table beside the bed. It didn't ring. I could have called someone. I knew that. I had numbers. Old friends, colleagues, people who would have answered, said the right things, maybe even stopped by if I asked. But I didn't pick it up. What struck me wasn't that I was alone. It was that no one needed to be there. No one's life was disrupted by me lying in that bed. No one was rearranging their day, or sitting in a waiting room, or feeling that dull knot of worry in their chest. And that's when the thought came to me, not all at once, not like lightning, more like something slowly surfacing. If we had kept that child, would we have been so easy to walk away from each other? I didn't think about the child first. That surprised me. I thought about us, about how every argument had an exit door, about how love, without anything tying it down, stayed optional. I lay there asking myself questions I'd avoided for decades. Was our freedom the reason we were happy? Or was it the reason nothing ever rooted deeply enough to survive? I don't have a clean answer. I still don't. But I know this, that decision we made all those years ago didn't just remove a future child from our lives. It removed a future version of us. A version that might have had to fight harder, stay longer, grow up faster than we wanted to. In that room, with the hum of machines and the hallway lights flicking on and off, I understood something I hadn't before. Some choices don't punish you immediately. They wait. For a long time, I told myself I didn't miss having a child. That was the story I stuck to. Even in that hospital room, I didn't suddenly feel a wave of grief or imagine a face that never existed. There was no name, no birthday, no picture in my wallet. What I felt instead was something harder to explain. It was the absence of weight. Nothing in my life had ever required me to stay when staying was uncomfortable. Nothing had demanded that I put someone else's future ahead of my own fear. Every relationship I'd had, including the most important one, came with an escape hatch, and I used that fact to justify leaving or letting things quietly fall apart whenever it got too hard. With her, it had been the same. When we argued, there was always this unspoken understanding. We didn't have to fix this. We could step back, cool off, reevaluate. That sounded healthy, mature, even. But what it really meant was that nothing forced us to push through the difficult parts. There was no shared responsibility waiting on the other side of the argument, no small life depending on us to get our act together. And over time, that changes how seriously you take each other. Disagreements became less about resolving anything and more about measuring distance. How far could we pull away before it snapped? The answer, it turned out, was pretty far. When she finally left, or when we finally agreed to stop trying, I'm not sure which, it wasn't devastating. That's what scares me now. It felt clean, logical, almost merciful. At the time, I thought that meant we were doing the right thing. Now I see it meant there was nothing strong enough to make us stay. It took me years to understand what I'd actually lost. It wasn't a child in the way people usually mean it. I don't walk around imagining who they would have been, what job they might have had, whether they would have called me on Sundays. My grief doesn't work like that. What I lost was the thing that might have held us in place, a reason to sit across from each other after a fight and say, "We can't leave this unfinished." A reason to swallow pride. A reason to stay in the room when walking out would have been easier. We never had that. So when she walked away, there was no one asking where she was going. No one whose world shifted because she packed her things. And when I stood there afterward, in an apartment that suddenly felt larger than it should have, there was no one looking at me like I was still essential. That's the part people don't talk about. You don't feel the full weight of a decision like that when you're young. You feel it decades later, when you realize how many moments passed where nothing depended on you staying. I didn't lose her because we weren't in love. I lost her because there was nothing tying us to a future we were afraid of. And now, at 82, I understand that kind of loss doesn't announce itself loudly. It just leaves you alone long enough to notice it. I want to be careful here, because this is where people usually start giving advice. I'm not interested in that. I don't trust advice much anymore, especially from people who already ran out of time. All I can do is tell you what that freedom actually cost me. Freedom, as I practiced it, meant I never had to stay longer than I wanted to. It meant I could leave a room, a relationship, a version of myself, the moment it stopped feeling right. And for a long time, that felt like strength, like self-respect. But there's a difference I didn't understand until it was too late. There's freedom, and then there's avoidance. I spent years telling myself I was choosing the first, when most of the time I was quietly practicing the second. I avoided the kind of responsibility that forces you to grow whether you're ready or not, the kind that doesn't care about your fear, the kind that doesn't let you reframe things until they sound reasonable again. I told myself I didn't want a child because I valued my independence. The truth is, I didn't trust myself to carry that weight. And instead of learning how, I stepped around it. That choice didn't ruin my life. That's important to say. I had good years. I had moments I'm grateful for. I'm not pretending otherwise. But it shaped my life into something lighter than it needed to be. Easier to carry, easier to set down. And when things are easy to set down, you eventually do. Here's the part I wish I'd understood earlier. When nothing truly depends on you, you start to feel optional. To other people, yes, but more dangerously, to yourself. You move through life without friction, and friction is often where meaning comes from. I used to think love alone would be enough to keep two people together. I really believed that. Now, I see love needs something to push against, something that asks more of you than comfort. Freedom isn't wrong, but using it to avoid becoming someone stronger than you are, that comes with a cost. And that cost doesn't show up on a balance sheet. It shows up when the noise dies down and there's no one left who needs you to stay. I'm not telling this story because I think everyone should make the same choices. I don't believe there's one correct way to live. If there were, life wouldn't feel this complicated. I'm telling it because some mistakes don't feel like mistakes when you're making them. They feel like relief. When we chose not to have that child, it felt like we were protecting our future, protecting our freedom, protecting ourselves from becoming people we weren't ready to be. And for a long time, that choice worked exactly the way we hoped it would. That's why it's so dangerous. If it had ruined everything right away, I might have learned sooner. If it had come with obvious suffering, I might have questioned it. But it didn't. It came with comfort, with ease, with the quiet approval of a world that told us we were being honest, responsible, modern. The cost came later. It came in the form of relationships that were easy to leave, in futures that never fully formed, in a life where, little by little, nothing required me to stay when staying was hard. If you're young, or even middle-aged, and you're listening to this, I'm not here to scare you. I just want you to be honest with yourself in a way I wasn't. When you say you're not ready, ask yourself what you're really protecting. When you say you value freedom, ask yourself what you're quietly avoiding. Some bonds feel heavy at first. They slow you down. They demand more than you think you can give. But sometimes, those are the very things that keep a life from drifting apart. I can't go back and choose differently. That door closed a long time ago, but you might still be standing in front of yours. So don't rush. Don't panic. Just don't lie to yourself. Because the years move faster than you think, and one day you may find yourself in a quiet room, realizing that the hardest part of freedom isn't what it took from you early on, it's what it left you without in the end. If this story stirred something in you, I'd like to hear it. Do you believe love alone is enough to hold people together? And when you think about your own life, what, if anything, truly requires you to stay?